Hello everyone and welcome to the next episode of the VICTA Parent Voice. This episode is entitled The Battle for Education. Now, education is a huge topic. I think we could do a podcast every month about the various issues that our visually impaired children have had within the education system. So we're going to try and compress quite a few points of view and various different educational journeys into this one podcast. I'm going to introduce our first guest, Suzanne Hollinshead, who's going to be speaking about Zach. Suzanne, do you want to just start by telling us a little bit about yourself and Zach and his disabilities and vision impairment condition?
Yes, hello, Charlotte. Thanks for inviting me on. Zach is my specialist subject. Like most parents with a SEND child, we live and breathe their journey as they're growing up. So Zach is now 17. He is registered blind, so he's severely sight impaired. He's also neurodiverse. He actually has quite a complex profile. His primary need is his vision impairment, but he has quite a rare genetic condition that affects all sorts of things like his coordination, and he does have some learning disabilities, but really important to say that he's very cognitively able. So I think for anybody listening, this might resonate because obviously in the early days when your young person is diagnosed with a vision impairment and other complex needs, you are going from pillar to post to really try and understand what's going on and how you can best help them. And it's unclear at that point exactly how able they are. When they're entering the education system, it can sometimes be a very softly approach just to see exactly how they're going to be able to access education. Zach has had an EHCP, Educational Health and Care Plan, since he joined school at 5. He's now 17. And I think for us, in those early days, we're in a 3-tier school system. So that's lower school, middle school, and upper school here. And for Zach in a lower school, it's all very nurturing. It's very supportive. Zach's always had a one-to-one. Yes, he was quite isolated because he wasn't able to run around a playground. He wasn't able to access lots of the fun activities that children do when they're going through school. But for us, the cracks started to appear as he moved into middle school, and particularly COVID hit for our family when Zach was in year 6. So just as that learning starts to step up, and that for us was where we really noticed that Zach was really struggling to access his education and he was becoming really isolated. He didn't have any friends. His self-esteem was really low. He was extremely tired all the time. And, we hadn't felt at that point, he would mask quite a lot being neurodiverse. So apart from being really, really tired, we had no idea really what level of learning he had. So it was a bit of a shock to realise that actually he wasn't really able to access anything. And pretty much he was sitting in a classroom, not correctly adapted resources. And whilst he did have a visiting QTVI, they didn't really understand his particular visual profile. So Zach has a mixture of ocular vision impairment, and so that's the health of his eyes, as well as CVI, so cerebral vision impairment. So that's the messaging from the brain. So for Zach, it's a real battle for him to access resources that have just been generally enlarged because he needs them decluttered. He needs to see things in a very simple format. And obviously with a reduced visual acuity, he also needs to see them larger. But the go-to for a lot of schools was let's just blow everything up onto A3, which actually made his brain work harder. And his QTVI didn't really understand those issues. So he ploughed on really, really struggling, and that started to affect his mental health. And that's where we saw things really deteriorate. And unfortunately, we had a spell of Zach being out of school while we battled to find the right kind of placement.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you for all that information. So you said in year 6, when COVID hit, is when you started to notice. Is that because he was at home and you were trying to help him access the learning, and then you realised this is a really difficult situation and the adaptations that had been made just weren't appropriate for him? Did you have to see it in real life for you to fully appreciate the situation he was in?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think because we were all doing online schooling or resources were coming home, and, the school were trying to make an effort to provide Zach with learning whilst we were all out of school. But actually, for us, it was a real shock because obviously I sat and took the place of an LSA for Zach and realised that actually he was really struggling. I could see by his physical movements. He would put his head on the desk, he would be distracted, we wouldn't be able to complete very little of the work. So, and by that point, Zach was reaching an age where actually I started to ask him, can you, how difficult is that for you? He couldn't read things out because they weren't on the right format. He was being given things like maps in geography and he couldn't make head nor tail of them. And so a lot of the tasks he was unable to actually get on task. So he had no achievement for any of the tasks set. And when I started to raise that, the school were a little defensive around it. And, as far as they were concerned, they were following instruction from visiting QTBIs. And that was all that they could really do. They were providing him with one-to-one support, but actually that wasn't enough for Zach. He needed very scaffolded, structured learning support by an LSA who had a real understanding of the type of vision impairment he had. So it became quite difficult. Unfortunately, the relationship with the school breaks down, and a lot of people will identify with this, is that obviously when you need to raise that your child is not receiving their education in a way that is helping them achieve, it becomes a difficult conversation. And that was a really difficult time for us.
So Zach is now a pupil at New College Worcester, a very successful pupil, which we will spend some time celebrating all his achievements and success a little bit later in the podcast. But what stage and what age did you realise this is working? New College Worcester is out of borough. It's a very well-known specialist provision for vision impairment children. At what age and stage did you go, right, enough's enough, we need to find something different here?
Yeah, so as Zach went into, everybody returns from COVID back into sort of bubble learning, if you remember that. So that was going into year 7. We started to ramp things up at that point, make it clear that actually we were very concerned. We were concerned about how well Zach was thriving in school. We were also concerned about how his mental health was being affected by his lack of achievement. And also his overall well-being and health, because he was so tired all the time. He would come home from school and sleep for hours. So he had no value in his life. And he would come out of school, sleep until tea time. I'd wake him up for his dinner. He would eat his dinner and he would go back to sleep, wake for maybe an hour, and then he would go to sleep fully. So apart from weekends, his existence was really poor. So we started to raise that formally with the school, and being quite naive at the time, we assumed that support would follow. And we'd always been keen to keep Zach in a mainstream setting. He's a twin. So he has that special relationship as well, and travelling his journey through school with his twin sister. But it became really obvious that we needed to look at a specialist setting where Zach could receive an education in the way that he could access it and thrive. But importantly, to be around other young people with similar challenges. So we conducted quite a big search. We heard about New College Worcester, but we didn't consider it at the time because it's a residential setting 100 miles away from our home. That's a big undertaking. So we exhausted our borough and our neighbouring boroughs in terms of looking for a suitable setting. And unfortunately, because visual impairment is low incidence but high impact disability, there are very few specialist settings that dedicate accessible education and all of the other important aspects like mobility, independent living skills, those sorts of things. So unfortunately, we came back round full circle to look at New College Worcester, and having visited the setting, Zach was almost mute. We went round there. He didn't say anything at all. He looked at his feet, but it was just such an uplifting experience seeing blind children walking very proudly, chatting to us, telling us about their experiences. But Zach said nothing, and we're thinking, gosh, what's he thinking? But when we got in the car to go home, he said he was quite quiet, and we struck up a conversation. How, what did you think? And, that was very tentative. His mental health was very poor at the time. And he said, well, actually, it's full of people like me, Mum, and when can I go back and have a proper assessment? Which was a real shock to us. For the first time, his voice saying, I found somewhere where there's people like me and they're enjoying life and they're learning, and I would like to be part of that. So for my husband and I, that meant, okay, we need to make this happen for you. And that was a 2-year battle that started at the beginning of year 7 for Zach. It was, to describe it as brutal, would be probably under-regging it really. It was a really tough struggle for us, a really big battle financially and emotionally, but we did get Zach into New College, Worcester in March 2023. So we started our battle in January 2021, and it took us just over 2 years to secure that place for him. So yes, it was really, really tough.
So during that 2 years when the battle was ongoing, is that the period of time that Zach spent out of school?
So Zach, to begin with, he continued in school and things deteriorated really quite a lot for him at that point in time because, as I said, we were in a 3-tier system. So Zach was approaching transition to upper school, and obviously the talk in year 8, end of year 8 into year 9 for an upper school, huge 2,000 children upper school. Everybody's talking about that. There's lots of benchmarking exams. That just sent him further into a spiral of crisis. So by sort of May, June of that year, it became really clear he'd shut himself away. He started to refuse school. I couldn't get him out of his bedroom. He had absolutely no value. And he just said, Mum, what's the point in me? And things became really scary for us. So my husband and I discussed it and said, actually, I think we can give him more at home. So at that point in time, we knew we were heading towards tribunal. So we removed him from school and he stayed at home with us from June that year right the way through to March the following year, which, you know, there are some young people who are out of school a lot longer. For us, it was quite a difficult time. We were battling through our tribunal process and we were also trying to homeschool Zach and give him some value and teach him Braille, importantly, which was a skill that our local authority were not comfortable in providing for him. So it was a real learning curve. It was a lot of extra pressure on the entire family. Obviously, for me, being his everything, and also, you know, his legal supporter, his mum, his teacher. It was a tricky time.
So for people listening, perhaps people who understand how difficult it is, the battle, the reason for the battle, because it's common. But from the outside looking in, say if you had nothing to do with education or the vision impairment community, you'd go in one school, not learning, not thriving, not happy. You've spent and done a lot of homework and legwork around researching suitable provisions, because obviously you weren't initially aiming for a residential setting. You've exhausted all them, so you've said, right, we found the perfect place. He's expressed an interest in wanting to go, which is really important, given his age. He's not a child anymore, so he's approaching the age where he can speak for himself. What was their main reasoning for saying no and for it taking so long for that placement to finally get approved?
Well, like all specialist settings, they're expensive. And there's a reason why they're expensive, because they do provide really tailored and specialist teaching and support. So for New College Worcester, all of the teachers there are qualified teachers of the visually impaired, and the setting itself is one of the very few that follow a national curriculum. So Zach, as I said earlier, is cognitively able, but he needs a lot of support to access that education. So, you know, that comes at a cost. And, you know, to be fair to local authorities, you know, they have to, for public purse, which is one of the reasons they use very regularly for refusing placements, they do have to follow a strict protocol to look at whether or not a setting is appropriate for a young person, especially when it can be fairly expensive. However, when a child cannot access their education in any other way than to be around other young people with vision impairments and with specialist teaching, in order for them to make any progress at all, it really shouldn't have been the battle it was. And I think that other parents will resonate with, in that you're not asking for a gold standard education for your child. You're purely asking for a setting that can meet their needs. And people use that term very freely. You know, I need something that's going to meet my child's needs. But it's understanding and having everybody understand what does that mean, because it doesn't just mean whether or not they're able to sit at a desk and see or access, through speech software or any of those things. It's not just about having something in Braille or something enlarged. It's about their wider needs. So their emotional well-being, their ability to mature and grow their independent skills, because, their battles are always going to be lifelong, with a visual impairment, whether somebody's severely sight impaired or just sight impaired, there's always going to be a battle not just for education, but a battle to get employment, to leave a full and active life. So I think all of those things are a consideration when we talk about meeting need and actually helping a young person develop properly, so that when they reach adulthood, they have a set of skills and they're able to achieve to their full potential exams and qualifications to help them follow their dreams. Because why should a child with these needs not be able to follow their dreams like other young people can?
Yeah, I completely understand. And we've talked about residential placement and your reluctance for that. In an ideal world, New College Worcester would be down the road and they'd let him in straight away and there'd be no messing. But that isn't obviously the case. It's very limited what is available for our children out there. So I'm going to ask firstly about how Zach felt about residential, and then this is a parenting podcast, so it's important to also talk about how you felt about that, Suzanne, because that must have been an absolute huge decision for you all to make as a family. Like you say, you've been his everything for so long. To an extent, we all have the potential for empty nesting coming up, and you had to start yours a lot sooner. And not only was he leaving home, he does have quite extensive needs, and like you said, a huge battle with his mental health and his well-being. So it must have been incredibly frightening for Zach, because he's thinking, how is this going to go? And my mum's not there to support and help, in the physical sense. But then also there must have been some sleepless nights involved in this decision.
There were. I think when Zach went for an assessment at New College Worcester, obviously in the early days, and I spent 3 nights not very far away from the college, in pieces, it's fair to say, thinking, gosh, I'm going to get a phone call. His mental health is so poor. He's not going to cope with this. We were such a tight little family unit that going through such a crisis, that it was all of these things were really anxiety inducing. And as a mum, I was incredibly close to all of it, because as I said, I was teaching Zach, I was trying to lift him out of his mental health crisis, and, I was desperate to get him what he needed. So it was very, very hard, but he bounced out of that assessment, didn't hear anything for 3 days. He was a different young person just after 3 nights. And, that spurred us on. So in terms of the decision to accept that a residential setting was the best thing for Zach, I think that we did that fairly freely, because once you see your child change from this tiny person with very little value for themselves, and you can see the potential, actually I think it removes some of that worry. However, actually, for seeing that going away, he was just 14 when he moved to a new college, and certainly his mental health wasn't fixed at that point, is a form of grief. And because as parents, you feel actually you should be able to provide everything that your child needs. And it was a really difficult, gut-wrenching feeling, thinking, actually, I need to accept this is right for Zach and it's what he wants. It isn't what I want, because I want to keep him close. I want to look after him. I want to fix him. But actually, Zach fixing himself was what he needed to do. And being at New College Worcester was where he needed to fix himself. So I think in terms of how he felt about it, he just asked me regularly, have the local authority said yes yet? We tried to keep a lot of the battles away from him. It's difficult because there were some very dark, difficult days of frustration in the process. It was very costly. There were lots of worries, financial worries along the way as well. So he was just really keen to go. When we finally got the green light that he was able to start, that's a feeling that is indescribable. It was like a light came on behind his eyes, and he just bounced into New College Worcester, and we haven't looked back since then. And that was just over 3 years ago.
That's amazing. And I'm glad it worked out so well. And I completely understand I've got a couple of these types of residential placement decisions coming up. And it's, we do understand that's what's best for our child, and it does alleviate some of the stress or worries that could be associated with putting them in a residential setting. But we also touched a little bit on people who don't fully understand that, and other mums' opinions on us sending our kids away to go and fend for themselves, because from the outside it could be quite easily seen that way. It's, off you go, you're becoming somebody else's problem. And it's not that at all. If you could stress that a little bit for me now, Suzanne, I think that would be helpful for parents who are thinking, I can't do this.
Yes, it's quite tricky, because sometimes people say things and they genuinely, they don't say it to be hurtful, but people have opinions about sending your child away, or, something outside the norm. And it isn't normal for you to decide suddenly that your child needs to go away to a residential setting. And, he's away three or 4 weeks at a time, comes back for home weekends and holidays and that sort of thing. So, but when he'd first gone away, and gosh, it was raw, and you're waiting for news every day, and it was tough. It was a real adjustment for the entire family. A couple of people, one in particular, said, gosh, I couldn't send my child away. I can't imagine how anybody could do that. I don't think they intended it to sound the way it came out, but it landed it's like a spear, isn't it? And another parent once described, when you have a child with additional needs, you kind of carry around a little pebble in your heart, because it's just that all the things you want for them that sometimes are just that little bit out of reach. And sometimes you have to make decisions that are really, really tough, and they're not what you want, but actually it's what your child needs. And hopefully it's what they want for themselves as well, because there is a difference. Sometimes you can have something you think that is right for your child, but they're not necessarily on the same page. And, that can be quite tricky too. So I think for anybody thinking or early in their journey about, gosh, residential setting, can't see that would ever work for our family. We were that family too, and it didn't come without lots of deep discussions and really digging deep into that parenting manual that nobody gives you, to actually work out whether or not you should follow that route. And it's certainly not an easy one. And we talk now as a group of parents at New College Worcester that support each other, that actually it never goes away. You're never completely comfortable with it, but actually the seeing your child thriving, and there are so many magical moments along the way, along the journey, certainly have been for us with Zach, that it removes any of those worries, or perhaps that worry that other people are judging for your decision to send your child away. And it's awful, isn't it? Even that phrase, I'm sending my child away to a residential setting, doesn't sit very well, does it? Because we're all very nurturing parents, and, having a VI child has meant that, we're very close to that process and very involved, because they need such a lot of care. It's also about trust. How could I trust somebody else to look after my child how I know they need to be looked after? And that as well is an element of it. And it's important to understand that there are other people out there that can support your child. They will do it differently, and sometimes they won't do it in the way that you would do it. But actually, what they do for your child is probably offer those wider independence opportunities, and that opportunity to grow, learn to self-advocate. We can bubble wrap our children a little bit. I like to think I don't with Zach, but I certainly look back and think, yeah, I probably could have been his worst enemy at times, because I wanted to safeguard him from hurting himself. So, going away to a setting who specialise in developing all of those life skills, you see that actually they're very capable. So all I'd say to other parents is, don't rule it out. It's always best to explore everything, because you might be surprised.
Brilliant. Thank you, Suzanne. And so the Zach that you spoke about at the beginning of this podcast and the Zach that you have now sound like two completely different people. I follow you on Facebook, so I see a lot of what Zach is getting up to, where he's raising money for charity. He been recently named Student of the Year as well? Is that correct? Yeah. I think it'd just be nice to tell parents about, where is he now? What is he doing? And what's his plans for the future?
Yes. Okay. So 14-year-old Zach and 17-year-old Zach are two very different Zachs. And as you say, there's lots of highlights. He has just been named Key Stage 5 Student of the Year at New College Worcester, which was wonderful for him and just such a boost. But in terms of educationally, he hit the ground middle 2/3 of the way through year 9s. He hurtled into GCSEs having not really ever had education that was accessible. So bless his heart, he championed those. He got to grips with everything. He took his GCSEs. He passed those with flying colours. He's now in sixth form, so he's in year 12. He's studying politics and business, and he hopes to add another A-level this coming year. So it's taking him longer. That's the brilliant thing about being in a specialist setting where you can bespoke the learning. So he's taking his A-levels, but over a longer period of time, because that's how his brain needs to process that learning. He's had a fantastic work experience placement locally here with our local MP, where he got stuck in the constituency office and he visited Westminster, and it was just wonderful for him. He's in Tesco in Worcester doing another week of work experience. He's supported by a member of staff from New College, and it's just joyful hearing from him each evening. I've done this, Mum. Yesterday was on the tills in Tesco Worcester, and learning all these new skills and being accepted and being supported and being acknowledged as he approaches adulthood. He's living the dream at the moment from a friendship point of view, because I think that's probably a really important one to mention. It's not just all about education and pathways to adulthood. It's also about friendship. It's about feeling like you fit in. He's recently had his year 12 prom. It was just fabulous seeing all of the students dressed up and doing what other kids do at that age, going to prom, enjoying themselves. And ordering takeaways with their friends, just living a normal teenage life. So in terms of what's next for Zach, we're incredibly proud of him because he has a real can-do attitude and feels like his life has a future. I think he'd love to do something in politics or civil service. He is a bright lad. It is difficult for people with visual impairments to secure employment. Unfortunately, only 1 in 4 currently manage to secure employment. So that's going to be another battle. But he's got us as a family there to support him every step of the way. And now with all of the toolkit that he needs to move into adulthood with confidence, hopefully his future's really bright.
Do you like all the celebrations that you do for Zach on your Facebook? And tribunals have been incredibly hard. If people go away and Google Suzanne Hollinshead, there's quite a lot of media coverage about how much was spent, how long it took, which is good. And I think it's really great that you highlighted what you were going through at that time, despite the struggles your family were facing. And it isn't just you; it was a whole family effort. And you told me a really lovely story about your daughter, because she was part of what was going on, and she's been led by that. So would you like to share a little bit about what is it your eldest daughter, what she's doing with her life now as a result of what you've gone through as a family?
Yes, our lovely Annie. So I am a mum of 3. As I said, Zach is one of a twin. So I have Zach and Isla, but I also have Annie. She's slightly older. She's 23. So really for her, when we were in the really dark days, Annie really lived and breathed that with us. It was easier to hide it from Isla and Zach, but Annie was going through all of her formal exams and going into sixth form herself. She chose to study law at sixth form. Absolutely loved it. And said, actually, Mum, I want to go away to uni and I want to get a law degree because I want to do something in human rights. I can't bear watching the unlawful behaviour of local authorities and all of the different things that you and Dad have been through. I've watched it firsthand. So off she went to university, and in that time we obviously went through the tribunal and we secured our place for Zach, and Annie got to see just how life-changing it was for Zach. So she graduated from her university with a first in law. She's now a paralegal for a London solicitors in special educational needs in London. And she's almost finished her 2 years and is about to take her qualifying exam so that she will be a fully qualified solicitor. And of course, currently that's specialising in education law. So she now every day supports other families going through similar battles. And what's brilliant is when you do reach out for legal support, yes, it's expensive, and there's some fantastic SEN solicitors out there, but sometimes they might not have fully understood your battle or gone through it. What's brilliant is Annie is able to support these families and genuinely empathises with what they're going through. And I think it's really brilliant. We're incredibly proud of her, because not only is she supporting lots of other families and giving something back, she's obviously able to continue to support us. In many ways, we feel sad that she had to witness all of that battle and that difficult time. But something brilliant has come out of it, and hopefully she will be there to support lots of families going forward with their battles.
It's brilliant, and well done to Annie. If Annie does listen, if she has any time to listen to the podcast, well done to you, and well done to Zach, and thanks Suzanne for coming on and sharing everything you've been through. You're a great example of, if you're tenacious enough, you can get to where you want to do. And it's so nice to hear that Zach is happy and thriving.
Thank you very much. All I would say to any parent out there is keep going, even when you think you don't have anything left. Just think of all of the other parents out there. We are all out here to support each other, and there's lots of routes to find parent support. Some great parent forums that I really valued during those periods. But just keep going, because actually the rewards are indescribable, and it can be really life-changing. It can be messy, but it can turn out brilliantly.
Brilliant. Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you.
I'm really pleased to invite on Christy. You're a really old friend, aren't you? We were just trying to think then, how long ago was the Project Braille calendar era? That's a long, long time ago now.
I'm going to scare you and say it was 11 years ago now, 2015, the beginning, yes. So at the end of 2015, beginning of 2016 was Project Braille's kind of heightened days. Yeah, and we did that calendar, didn't we? And everybody came down. It was fantastic to meet everybody, because up until that point, we only all knew each other from social media.
That's
so I think
right.
that was our first sort of meeting in person.
Yeah, mine and Christy's daughter are very similar ages, so we I'd say come up in this world. We were just in all the same forums, went to the same events. So like I said,
for the same advice, I think, and the same kind of guiding, weren't we? And yeah,
things are so much more different now than they was back then. So yeah, when I was thinking about an education podcast, you did pop into my mind to chat, because Lily Grace's story, it was quite a huge one in mainstream media, and it highlighted a lot of things for other parents, and made a lot more people a lot more parents in the vision impairment community understand what some of the barriers are. And also you're a brilliant example of fighting against it. So yeah, would you want to start just by telling us a bit about yourself and Lily Grace?
So we live in a little village in southwest Bristol, just not far from Parkway Station. And my children were, my two older boys at the time would have been 13 and 7, and they both attended a local primary school. And it felt the natural lead for me to take my daughter, Lily Grace, even though we were aware she'd been diagnosed for quite some time at that stage, that we wanted her to go to that school. I also worked at that school, and it just felt the most natural thing. The idea of anything other than mainstream, I couldn't get my head round. I knew the school well. It was such a nurturing, loving environment that I felt she would do well there, and she would be, well loved and looked after. And it did work that way for a good 8-9 months, and then cracks started appearing. So little things that I'd started to pick up from. And obviously, as you mentioned earlier, us meeting each other and having that information online about Braille reading, about K-News, something that hadn't really been highlighted to me by Vision Support within Bristol. It'd been mentioned, but I think, again, there's a lot of information that overwhelms you when your child's diagnosed, and takes a good long time to navigate and to find which is going to suit your child and which is going to suit their needs. So through that, Lily Grace had started. I posted a video of Lily Grace at Christmas time with a wrapping paper tube, an empty wrapping paper tube. And I said to her, and she was walking around using it as a mobility aid, as a cane. I didn't know this at the time, and I posted a video, as I did frequently back those days, of her progress and what she was up to. And another parent sort of messaged me and said, has she not had any cane training? And I was like, no, nothing's been mentioned. I was said that it would be available, but way in the future. And they were like, no, she's got some natural skills there. So I went to a QTVI, which is a qualified teacher for the visually impaired, that used to come into the mainstream school, and said to her, hey, what about a cane? So she was like, I think she's a little bit young. Again, went back, did some more research in America, found more people, saw that it was actually children were using canes from the minute they were walking. And at this age, Lily, we remember, it was like 5, 6. So I was thinking, right, well, she's already sort of behind, if you like. So I took it upon myself to provide her with a cane, again through another friend through social media, whose daughter had outgrown hers, and she sent it to me. Immediately, within minutes, I put it in Lily Grace's hand, and it just seemed like it was the third wheel, like it's something she'd been lacking. And off she went, and she ran with it. And up until that point, she'd walked, and everything was careful, and everything was considered. And this cane, it was evident and clear how much confidence it gave her from the get-go. So I went into school and said, this is her cane. This is what she's going to be using it in coming into school and coming out of school. Not sure it's appropriate within school at this moment in time, but we're working on that. And with that, I went to Bristol Sensory Support, and they provided her with some cane training with a mobility teacher who came once every 6 weeks to the mainstream school to do some activities in the playground with the cane and cane train her. So that had gone on for about 8 or 9 months. And I was told quite a few times from the mobility teacher, from emails and kind of synopsis that he'd made of each time that he'd been teaching Lily Grace, that he didn't feel she was ready to use a cane full time, that he didn't feel she was competent enough, that he felt that she moved too quickly. I saw all these things as a bonus, really. So kind of, I ignored him, but, told her, don't use it within school. But we used to walk to school. The school was that close. We used it to walk to and from school. And then one day, what felt like completely out of the blue, come to collect her on the playground. And I still remember this, Charlotte, and I've never said this before, but it came to me after. It was a superheroes day, and everybody was dressed as superheroes, and her teacher was dressed as Supergirl. I had made her a costume as Brailler Girl, and I'd made a cape, and I'd brailled in buttons, Brailler Girl, and she had I dressed her all up. And we went in, and the teacher pulled me aside in a Supergirl outfit and said, I've got some news for you. You're not really going to like it, but we've had to have a decision, and we've had to base the needs of the whole school on this decision. So, okay, so what came next, I did not even imagine. We're not able to facilitate Lily Grace using her cane within school. And I sort of head tilt. Really? For what reason? We think it's not safe for the other children. So just to add that Lily Grace was going into school, hanging her cane on her peg. I was hanging her cane on her peg, picking her up from school, taking her cane from her peg and walking out with her. She was never using that cane within school independently. They didn't want to. I got that sense, and she was happy to, so it worked. So I in utter shock, sort of turned on my heels, went home, had half an hour to chew on it, and just felt more and more, just felt livid, literally just anger just rose. I can't describe, I've just given my child a tool. She's working towards independence. She's doing so well with it. And you're now saying she can't use it. This can't be right. This can't be true. So I rang the head, who I mentioned earlier that I'd worked at the school for years. So I considered her a friend, not a close friend, but a friend within the workplace, and sort of said, you are joking. I've just been told this, but that's not true, is it? No. It is true. I'm afraid to tell you, Christy, it is true. We've had an assessment by an independent advisor who's deemed it health and safety risk. So again, I said I've heard that, but who's the health and safety risk to? The other children. So I said, I really can't believe you're making this decision. I really think you need to look into this, and we need to take some more advice before you put this blanket rule. And she said, no, this is as it stands. We will review it in a few months' time, but for the time being, I insist that you don't let Lily Grace bring her cane into school. To which I do. I'm not so much proud of myself for this, but I did say, do know that I will not leave this alone, and this will not be the end of the matter. And her words were, you need to do what you need to do. And I did.
You certainly did.
I happened to know, through Project Braille, I'd been doing some media work. I'd kind of built some friendships with some journalists, and I rang one and I mentioned it to him and was like, that is disgusting. That is an absolute abomination. I'm writing about this. We're doing this. Are you happy about this? And it took me 2 days to go, oh, I don't know. I live in a small village. Everybody's going to hate me. Oh, this school. I'd love the school. My sons had left by this point, but I'm like, I had such strong relationships with everybody in the school, the children, and I knew that it would mean the end of that. And then I just thought, if you like, okay, let's do it. Let's do it. So he wrote it, and little did I know that it was front page news. And it went front page news on, I think it was 17 countries. And we were front page news in Russia.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, I still find that the most ironic. Russia, and that is still one I remember. Russia, New Zealand, some real abstract countries. It hit the New York Times, it was just the Huffington Post, all the big names, Yahoo, all the big names media back 10 years ago. It hit all of them, and it was insane. The next morning, from it being front page news on our local paper and it going viral, I had the media at my door, literally like paps, taking photos. My God, hiding Lily away and going, whoa, I just need to absorb this for a minute. And then we kind of got caught up in a whirlwind. We were invited on GMT News. We were invited on This Morning, and it was it would have meant a full day of media. Like we see much now when there's a story that hits the news, then it's on the Great Britain news. It feeds through the day, doesn't it? And I made the decision to do one because at that time I knew she fatigued. It was a lot. And I was also very hotly aware of the aggro that I was causing within my own local village. So we just did the one interview, which she was absolutely brilliant. And they were super lovely, and she walked on set with her cane, and they asked her about what she enjoyed about her cane and what she enjoyed about school, and it was a wonderful experience for her, and I definitely came away feeling empowered, and I know she did, getting on the train and everybody thinking she with her cane and everybody knowing who she was and kind of applauding and celebrating this child that was using her cane, as opposed to it being a bad thing or something that was dangerous. That was the thing, that this mobility tool was dangerous to other children in a primary environment. And the media literally sent that away and said absolutely not, and celebrated it. And again, still very, very lucky, because I read stories now, and I'm sure you do, and you don't always get all good vibes from people. Some people are just there to troll and say some of the most horrible things, but that didn't happen to us. We built friendships around the world that I'm still in contact with, people that wrote to me or messaged me going, I was frightened to use my cane, but when I saw your daughter using her cane, it inspired me, and now I use my cane. And if a little girl can use a cane, then I can use a cane, and I'm in my 50s, and all those lovely things. And equally, parents who hadn't had that opportunity to cane train and were like, okay, so we can get cane training for our child. So it kind of, it sent a message out. And, looking back now, 10, 11 years later, there are moments I cringe and I would change. But on the whole, it did such a good thing. And it was so empowering for her and many other children and parents and adults at that time, that it's hard to look back and say it was a mistake. It was just something I would have done slightly differently now. But that is the lesson you learn. And that's also the 10, 11 years more experience I've got of being a parent to Lily Grace.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's brilliant. And everyone remembers it in the news. And it was good, because I still meet parents now and they're told, 8 or 9, maybe you should start considering a cane. I was quite lucky that they were trying to get Scarlett to hold one quite early on. And like you say, social media connections then, especially out in America, they seem to be really keen on cane use then. So obviously you had that issue in the school, you blew it all up, it inspired lots of people. What happened with the relationship with the school from that point?
It severely severed. We've lost us friends to this day that I was very close friends with that I don't speak to, will refuse to speak to me. I can be shopping and I've seen them, and there's a handful, but that will still not speak to me. And that makes it still, I'll be honest with you, Charlotte, it still makes me sad. I still say to my husband, and he goes, oh, you did what you had to do, but that they still, after all this time, can't see that it was never about them. It was never about the school. It was never personal. It was about making my daughter the best person she could be with her disability and making her excel within her environment.
Exactly, and schools are supposed to be inclusive. What kind of a lesson is that? It's imagine saying, "Oh, you can't go in Tesco if you've got the cane," or "You can't go." It's very similar to that. I don't think I've ever come across. Yeah, I don't come across a school that has ever said no cane because of safety purposes. I understand guide dogs and taxis seems to be a bit of a hot topic at the minute. Did Lily Grace remain at that school? Did they allow her?
No, she was, because it was so I went back and sort of had communications with the head saying I really want her to come back, and her sort of attitude, she's not coming back until we can ascertain that it's not a health and safety risk to the other children. So that then accumulated with Lily Grace being off school for nearly 11 weeks. To which I was on to our local authority every day, where we need to find a replacement. And by the February, they'd found a replacement in a resource base, and it was a VI resource base not too far away, which was absolutely phenomenal and just welcomed the cane and Braille, and she had a QTVI every day. Looking back, yeah, it was a romantic notion to think that a child with a disability like blindness was going to fit in the mainstream environment, and particularly the mainstream environment of that local school at that time. And like I said, I put that very much into it, that the children, there were 22 to a class. It was a very small village school.
Yeah.
Whereas maybe one that had been more eclectic in inner Bristol would have witnessed more diversity and inclusion, and had more experience of inclusion than this particular environment had had. But when she went to then her second school, which she stayed until she was in year 6, was a fantastic experience. And just literally, she doesn't even remember her first primary school. She doesn't remember anything about it. She doesn't remember the cane. She remembers tidbits of being in London and being on the train and being celebrated for that. But not when I've said to her recently, she doesn't. And I'm so pleased about that. I'm so pleased that it means absolutely nothing to her, because everything from that moment on has been a positive, and always celebrated her use of her mobility tool and her use of her how she navigates this world with her blindness.
Brilliant. And so I see you've done absolutely a phenomenal amount of fundraising for children all over with regards to Perkin brailers. Is that the correct phrase?
Right, yeah, the smart brailers. So yeah, I think we raised, I think it was last count, I think it was about 80,000. And the brailers were about £3,000 each. So we started in the UK from the competition, the brailer competition that she won. But I'd already built some kind of, it's mad to say now because social media has changed so much, but I'd already built a following from that. She got 4,000 votes in 3 days. Because I had some power on social media. I had some followers. I had some traction. So she won that from that. And I used that traction then to fundraise for the other children within the competition. And then it just snowballed. And then another parent, and I just couldn't say no. I still struggle to say no. So I just took it each time we did another event. We did a frock swap. We did a book fest. We did a Braille bingo. We did endless karaoke nights. Anything that I could think would be fun and that we could get people in a local pub and having a good time and Lily would enjoy and we could fundraise from. And every parent that gained every parent's child that gained a brailer then jumped on board and would share. And it was such a lovely time. And I look back at it and realise it was such a lovely time. I have failed miserably to get that same traction on social media since, though I do try. And I do have a steady following on my Facebook of visually impaired adults and children, which has stayed there and stood the test of time. But that made it very powerful and that made it easy. And then, so I went on and then it went, like I said, then it sort of went national. And then I was taking, parents messaging me, my child is in year 5 and has not done any brailing. So we got him a braille machine and then we did case by case basis. And then I think the last 2 went to America and India. So we kind of went international in the end.
Global movement.
And then we had a big thing planned for a 10-year celebration. And 5. What am I talking about? Oh my God, for a 5-year celebration. And then COVID hit, and it just felt so inappropriate to start doing any fundraising. And I've literally done very minimal since.
Yeah.
though I've got a plans for some Meta sunglasses, or they're not sunglasses, Meta glasses for the Brailler children, which I've kind of is still in talks, but that's something I'd like to next do, is provide the children that had Braillers back 10 years ago with the latest state-of-the-art gadget, which is the Meta glasses. So that's, I'll keep you posted on that, Charlotte, because I think that'd be something lovely that they could benefit from.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, definitely a case of watching this space. So Lily Grace is, I know people who have listened to the start of this podcast have heard a little bit about New College Worcester. Lily Grace is currently at the same school. So how did that go, getting her from a school that she was in that was lovely with the base out of borough into residential, and what were your feelings around that?
Lily Grace, so COVID was in 2020 and Lily was then in her last 6 months of primary school. Lily Grace always had quite a delicate immune system, and COVID, I pulled Lily Grace out in the January when officially COVID, the schools closed in March. I'd already pulled her out. And I was doing work at home with her then, but I pulled her out. And again, I thought, like we all did at the time, we had no idea what COVID was going to evolve to be and how long it was going to go on with. So I pulled her out, not knowing that that literally was the end of her education at primary school as we knew it. She was invited back, because it was key workers and children with SEN that were invited back. So she was invited back in the May, but it was, there were 6 children in the class and the experience dropped off. So from that January 2020, she lost education. She lost her peers until January 2022, which is when she started. January 2023, which is when she started at New College Worcester. So during that time, so when she was at primary school, like we all do, we apply for our secondary school place, and I applied for 2 places. They point blank refused both, the council, but they didn't tell me that because COVID was a good excuse. I didn't find out about that till the end of June of that year. So effectively, I knew there was no place for Lily in September. I was aware of that in the June. So I told them what I wanted. I knew New College Worcester was always on the agenda from years ago, 5-10 years ago. I'd mentioned it. It was either New College Worcester or Wessex in Exeter. Either or was equal distance from our home in Bristol, and either or would fit the vibe for the education that I felt Lily deserved. As time went on, it was clear that they were not budging, the local authority. They sent tutor in the end, but were like, we want her to go to this mainstream school, mainstream senior school, but it's got a resource base. But it wasn't a VI resource base. So me being me, I fought at every turn. I had council attendance officers knocking on my door at 10 o'clock at night, wanting to know where she was. Letters of attendance, fines, everything. And I kept her home. I just kept strong. And we employed a solicitor in the end, which cost a lot of money. And again, was so grateful that I needed to do some fundraising to meet that shortfall. And within 6 weeks, the solicitor rewrote her ECHP plan, basically told the local authority what was what. And it was within a couple of weeks, they decided it was going to tribunal. It never got to tribunal. They decided and awarded Lily Grace the funding to go to New College Worcester, which she started in, as I mentioned, January 2023. That has been the absolute making and the best experience that young lady has had in her life.
Yeah.
She's got peers, she's got a friendship group, she shares a room. She shared a room with one of her best mates that she adores. She's got lots and lots of friends. She's just completed a week's work experience at Waitrose, which is their local supermarket, and which she's absolutely loved. She takes part in everything she can. She's just been part of any production with drama. She's studying A-levels at the moment.
Oh, amazing. Oh, that's fabulous. It is mental, isn't it?
It's insane. They did say, the fact that she took GCSEs, I was like, whoa. And she was getting incredibly stressed about revising. She's so studious that everything now, I didn't know that 10 years ago, but I know it now. And I'm so glad that I stuck with my instincts and everything she showed me, because that child is so determined, so studious, so wants to get things right, is so loves education, that it would have been the biggest travesty to not have given her these opportunities. And every opportunity we've presented with her, she's ran with it. She's not just run with it, she's excelled at it. And she's done her absolute utmost to make it the best experience and opportunity she can. So she's absolutely living her best life. So as I said, she's now training. She's allowed independently to Waitrose on her own. because her cane skills are that good. And I'm told over and over that her cane skills are so natural, and it's so clear that some has been taught, but she's so natural. Something that the children have to work very hard to achieve. And she was determined when she started, I'm doing that. I've got set myself a goal of 3 months, and that's where I want to be. And this is what she does. And she does the same for revising for exam. So her GCSEs. Mum and Dad were like, come on, Lily Grace, we just want you to try your best and feel you've done your best. Whatever you do, we are so proud of you. That wasn't good enough for her, was it? Of course. She wanted GCSEs. She wanted 5 GCSEs. So she got 5 GCSEs. And now she's got the opportunity, as I said, to do A-levels. She's going to be doing lots of accreditation courses along with that. And we don't know what that looks like, A-levels for her. She has found the first year very, very tricky. But I'm told that from lots of other parents who've got children their first year A-levels, that's very normal. So it's onwards and upwards. She's in such a positive space. And like I said, it's cheesy as a quote, but she really is living her best life and enjoying, and is the happiest young lady by far.
Oh, no, it's so good to hear. And, well done for A-levels, because you just never imagine it. And I suppose if you would have put her in the school that was named with the resource base, just a resource base for anyone, which sometimes is just a little room where they sit in with other children with disabilities, and it doesn't mean that anything's adaptive or inclusive.
It's not inclusion, that is exclusion in itself. They're not being included. Yeah.
There's no way to say anything would have been made accessible. She definitely wouldn't have reached the academic achievements that she's reached now if she would have went there. So well done to you for standing your ground. But there is a big thing about New College Worcester, which a lot of parents struggle with, and what me and Suzanne spoke about earlier on, sending her to a residential. I know how close you and Lily are, Krista, and I can imagine it
just had the goosebumps go up my spine as you said it. I'd be lying if I said otherwise. It is the hardest thing I've ever had to do, and it still makes me emotional. It really does. I go past a bedroom every night that's empty. I absolutely hate that side of it. But it was a sacrifice that I would willingly make over and over again because of what it meant for her. It isn't about me. Children are we're supposed to equip them with everything to fly the nest. She's just flown it a little bit earlier. But what we do is the weekends are so precious. When she's home, it's so precious. We make such good use of that time. She speaks to me 20 times a day. We speak about everything. Everybody knows that I'm her best friend, and they all comment about how lovely our relationship are. So it hasn't changed anything. If anything, it's made our bond stronger. Mums and teenage girls. I was a teenage girl once. I wasn't the easiest. It's tricky. I'm also very proud to say that, mental health is something we don't look at and we don't talk about enough. We still don't. And whether that be disability at any level. And I'm very pleased, and I'm very, very conscious, and we talk about it all the time, that her mental health she's got very, very healthy mental health, very, very good positive body image, very good attitude towards things. And that's something that I was worried that by that gap with her going to school and not seeing her for 5 nights. She does come home every weekend, I will add, because we are local enough and we do have that, which I know some parents don't even have that. And I don't know. So we'd have to have moved, I think.
Yeah.
If it had been that case, we would have moved, because I don't think either me or my husband could have coped without her for weeks and weeks on a time. But I'd be lying if I said it wasn't something that I still find 4 years on. And in September, I will cry buckets when she goes back, and I will feel lost for a couple of weeks because I just don't know what to do with myself. But at the back of my mind, I know I speak to her. I know she's happy. I know she's secure. I know she's doing what she loves to do. So that fills me up. That comforts me that it's the right thing to do. And what I'm feeling is also perfectly natural and part of this process.
Brilliant. Okay, so going to touch on something else that you may or may not have considered. It's not something I've had to consider with Scarlett's needs. But are you a little bit apprehensive about what will happen to her once she leaves that bubble and safety of a school full of children that are like her and that can empathise with her, and the extensive level of support that New College Worcester offers? But there has been parents who say it's perhaps not preparing them properly for the big wide world. I assume you've got some thoughts around that.
That's my job, to prepare for the big wide world. I want school to educate her and give her all those skills within that environment, and like you said, make it all accessible and adaptable for her. I very much feel that's my role, to make her ready for the big bad world. Yes, it petrifies me. but it petrifies me no less than it did when she was leaving primary school, and no less than when she was at home for 2 years. I know we'll make it work. There are discussions at the moment to New College Worcester becoming an up to 25 facility, which we would welcome and fully support, and would be just the icing on the cake, really. We've also talked about maybe a university. We've got UE very close to us. I know they've got adapted residencies there, so that's also an option. So we have options, and we're already talking options. Lily Grace at least has another year, potentially another 2 years there for definite.
Yeah.
She will do 12 and then post 13. But it is something, it like I said, it is scary. I am petrified, but no less than I was 5 years ago, and it worked out. So I think each time you go, well, do you know what? I was worried about that, but it was all right.
Yeah.
And I think this is how I'm looking at it. The work experience last week has said to her, Mum, I want a job. She wants a part-time job, which again we're going to find for her and find somewhere that's accessible, and we'll be able to adapt that so she can enjoy having a part-time job like every other 17-year-old girl a child through the summer that wants to make a bit of extra money for themselves. So, I don't know what that looks like, in all honesty. I really don't know what that looks like, but it is going to take a lot of work from us, from her, and all school before she leaves school, to put those things in place, that she is ready, and she is ready to navigate the world as a blind person and as a minority, not a majority as she is at school right now.
Brilliant. So if it does go to 25, and well, it is moving to 25, what do you feel your local authority's response will be for you trying to keep her in there? Do you think you can have a bit of a battle, or do you think they're just fed up and they know which way is going to go in the end anyway?
Do you know what? There are still little intricacies with South Gloucestershire that I'm still battling with to this day. I swear somebody sees my name and goes, I'm not dealing with her. Go on, who's in the office? Who wants to speak to her? So I imagine they're always going to be my nemesis. What can I say? No, I don't expect it to be a walk in the park. But none of it is. None of it has been before. But then part of me thinks that they know I'm not going to give in. So whether they go, she ain't going to leave it alone. Just let her out. I don't know. I'm fingers crossed that they're going to go that way, as opposed they want to battle again. But if so, then that's what it takes. Then bring it on. Round 4, ding ding, here we go,
So we're coming to the end now, so it'd be nice to leave a big strong message for the parents that are listening. Obviously we spoke about everything from braillers to canes to specialist education. Have you got an overarching piece of advice that you'd like for parents to take away after listening to you speak?
Don't listen to the experts. Take what they say and take it, but don't listen to the experts. You need to find another parent with a child that is appropriate to your child's age, that is a peer with a disability matching. Or equally, you need your child. Your child will go on to do everything you want your child to do, and they will succeed within their environment and within the right setting. Setting is key. The biggest message I think right now is mainstream is not it. I'm very, very passionate. We have tried to force too many children into mainstream environments, and it is clear. I've been working in the setting. It is clearly not working. You've got children absolutely crying out for help. Do not listen to your local authority. Do your homework yourself. Look at schools. Find other parents. Find parents like myself that are further on down the line, and get lots of opinions and lots before you make a decision based on what an expert will tell you, or somebody from your local authority who's never met your child, has no understanding of their needs, has no idea of your family or your environment. That would be my biggest message.
Amazing, Christy, and thank you so much for giving up the time
to
come and join me. It's always a pleasure.
It's lovely to chat to you, Charlotte. Like I said, we leave it too long.
100%. Now you take care of yourself. For this segment, I'm welcoming Phil, who's going to be talking about the struggles that he's had with his 2 children around education, getting the right placements, getting the stuff in the EHCP met. He has 2 children who are vision impaired for different reasons, but it's also important for people to be aware that Phil's children are not just vision impaired, they are what would be considered complex needs. So I'm just going to hand over to Phil now, if you want to tell us a little bit more about Mason and Ashton.
Hello, everyone. And yeah, I am dad to A 9-year-old and a recently turned 6-year-old last week. 9-year-old Mason was diagnosed autistic at age 3, and 6-year-old Ashton, who was born with Dandy-Walker syndrome. He's got a genetic disorder, complex needs, and he's in a wheelchair. And yeah, as part of the complications with him, he's got hydrocephalus as part of the Dandy-Walker syndrome, from where his part of his brain didn't develop when he was newborn, and he's got vision things linked to that brain not being formed right. He's got CVI and a few other little things, squint. Obviously, the podcast being a vision focused one. Interestingly, we knew about Ashton's vision problems earlier. I think because he had such complex needs, he had a lot of specialist input, and it was the school that offered, once he'd been the ophthalmologist and they found some things, they had a specialist team that they wanted us to be referred to. And I think that was basically the QTVIs, but we didn't know them by that name at that time. And I think because of his complex needs, we probably weren't as concerned about his vision problems, because when we thought we were going to lose him as a bairn and we didn't know he was going to make it, anything else is a bonus. So we weren't as concerned about him. Mason, on the other hand, he's only just recently been registered severely sight impaired, literally, I think, back in April this year. And it would appear that he's basically just been slowly losing his eyesight over the last year as a result of a deficiency in vitamin A, which is linked to his really poor diet. He was diagnosed with ARFID, avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, last year. Basically, I think that just explains why he lives on cream crackers and popcorn chicken out of KFC. He just got really, really ill at the back end of last year. He spent a month in hospital from Boxing Day. And he had some eye infections, which he had ulcers on his cornea. Basically, once he got into hospital and he was really sick, and they did blood tests finally, because it doesn't like the doctors, so it was hard to, find the problems at the time. And they went, yeah, no, he's deficient in just about everything. There's next to no vitamins in there. There's no iron. There's no nothing. That's why he's riddled with infections and really, really weak and malnourished. So that basically brings us up to speed on my 2 beautiful boys that are, they're lovely, but they're a challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine as a parent of a complex needs child, and it's the tests that they need. When they don't comply with it, it's getting to the bottom of what's wrong. Scarlett's need various examinations and blood tests, and even just feeling her stomach over. They don't let them, and it does make getting to the problem of some medical issues quite difficult.
It certainly does. And I think, obviously, from a hospital side of things, the child is already got complex needs such as autism and whatever, and we know he finds it distressing to be put through these tests. If he's already presenting as potentially healthy for him, then they're kind of reluctant to obviously persevere and put him through something traumatizing. Both of my kids are mostly nonverbal, so he's not able to tell us there's something going on with my eyes, I can't see anything. So we're just kind of, between us and school, we're just kind of piecing together things like, well, why is he falling over all the time? He seems a bit more clumsy than normal. Oh, well, maybe he's just under the weather.
Well, that's it. I suppose, like a lot of these conditions that Mason has,
we're both, yeah,
can affect your coordination. So it would be quite hard to pick it up, because especially things like dyspraxia and that, or hypermobility that comes along quite often with neurodiversity. Are they falling over because of that? Are they banging into things because they're not paying attention? So the fact that it's been picked up after a year is quite good, because it could have potentially gone on for a lot longer with you not realising that it was a vision issue. So with children like my daughter Scarlett and Ashton and Mason, you'd think it'd be pretty clear cut, wouldn't it? They'd get an EHCP, the complex needs. They're going to need, definitely specialist education. Mainstream is out of the question. But think that would make the journey quite simple.
Well, okay, so yeah, we'll start with Mason. as much as we've had struggles with the EHCP itself, I think his whole journey will have been quite fortunate, so I'll put that at the start. He started off just going to a local nursery where we used to live. We started him when he was almost 3. He was either 2 or he was just turned 3, thereabouts. And this was before his diagnosis. And nursery, the head teacher, quite quickly, I mean, obviously when the 2-year-old, they've got a relatively high level of supervision anyway, and we just started a couple hours each morning, and the head teacher pretty quickly noticed something wasn't quite right, and had just mentioned it to us, like, have we heard about autism? Have we thought about it? But I think once nursery kind of got into it, we're like, well, I think, if you think so, we're happy to explore it. So what happened was nursery had actually put in for some funding. They were basically able to get him a 1-to-1 for the time he was there. This was before diagnosis and before a formal EHCP. And then they were the ones that kind of says, right, we think he might well be autistic. This is the next step. So we followed the next steps. And so this was to go down like the autism pathway. I mentioned it to the GP and the paediatrician at the time, who kind of put the referral in and got that ball rolling. And I mean, that process, I think that maybe took 6 to 9 months. And it was a bit interesting because obviously it was COVID times. So to my knowledge, there was no actual physical meeting between anybody on any of the selection panel or whatever the terms are and Mason. It was all evidence-based and, nursery, what they had witnessed and they kind of, I mean, for the most part, they led the charge with it. They were the ones that actually filled out the referral and all the forms, and they just says, are you happy for us to do this? Can you fill in a little bit of your views and whatnot? So we did that. And then, he got his diagnosis. And then once we did that, we went, okay, what does this look like for school? They went, well, you'll have to go for an EHCP. Again, the nursery supported us a lot with that. I remember I ended up having to take a phone call with the educational psychologist whilst I was at work because that's the only time they could fit it in. Eventually, we got the EHCP issued, which is kind of a weird thing to be congratulated on. And you go, okay, right, what happens now? Well, we can't name a special school yet. I mean, the ed psych said special would be suitable, but he didn't, he couldn't rule out mainstream with a lot of support. So what we've done, we've got to name your nearest mainstream school because that, that's the nearest thing and we want to give that a go. So I was like, okay, what's a special look like? What does mainstream look like? Asking a load of questions. I probably rang around every single special school, several different primaries. I want to speak to your Senko as soon as possible. Do you want me to bring Mason in? Whatever. I was very proactive, and yet the specials were basically full. So whilst the caseworker is consulting with as many special schools, and there's not a great deal of them in County Durham, if I'm honest. But so while she's doing that, I says, right, well, if you're going to be naming mainstream as a backup, or if that's even an option, I will be hounding the Senko for information to just see how this is going to be. Is this even a possibility? Or we'd gotten to the age where he should have gone to reception, and they had named mainstream. I'd been in contact with the Senko at the mainstream school. She was lovely. I didn't need to hound her as it was. She just says, well, why don't you come on down? If you want a visit, bring Mason after school when it's quiet. We did the visit. Mason lasted about 5 minutes before he wanted to go back in the car. So Mammy took him back in the car, and then I just continued to have a good conversation with the Senko at the mainstream school. The crux of it was basically, whilst they could not legally turn him away, and they wouldn't, and they would offer as much support as they possibly could if they had to make it work, her honest opinion was, we're not suitable. Mason is not going to cope in a class of 30 kids. They didn't have like a breakout room or a sensory room. I mean, they did their best to accommodate him. They cleared out a broom cupboard and turned that into a small sensory space. So in no way am I suggesting that the school wouldn't have bent over backwards to try and make it work. But in all honesty, it wasn't a right fit for Mason. They knew it. I knew it. So we took that back to the local authority. I don't think it's safe. What do we do? And that's when his current nursery at the time actually stepped up and said, right, we're willing to keep him on for another year if the local authority's happy with that. And they jumped at the chance because guess what? They didn't need to worry for another year for a special place. 3/4 of the way through that year, we then found we had to move house because Ashton was born with all the complex needs. And by this point, he was 1 year old and we'd already had, a lot of input from physiotherapy and OTs and whatnot going, the house you're in is not really suitable. But yeah, basically we then had to move to the other side of the county to find a 3-bedroom bungalow. Then it was like, well, okay, what do we do for school now, for nursery? Because he's settled in his old nursery, but we can't be making that trip every single day. So again, we got very, very, very lucky in that we then were able to transfer him to Selby Cottage, which is a council-run preschool nursery. I basically had reached out and just said he's got additional needs, and it was halfway through the year, and again they were able to bend over backwards and get support in place with help from the LA, and they were able to move him there for the remainder of that year. He turned 5 in the March, so the September following, legally, he had to be at school. So, okay, right, how are we getting on with the special schools? They're all full. Right. Okay, well, and obviously all this time we'd been moving house and all that, we've been in touch with the local authority, keeping them up to date. We're just saying, look, we've moved areas now. What does this look like for specials in the area? Because, I wasn't too sure. We were getting to the crunch, to the very end of the academic year, and we still didn't know whether Mason had a place. Obviously they're meeting his needs right now, but are they allowed to have kids that old? Because they're only a preschool nursery. Miraculously, it never got to the point where we actually had to go to a visit at the school that we were named. I just remember getting an email or a phone call just going, I don't know how it's happened. I don't know if somebody's dropped out, but you have managed to get one of the very, very, very final places at Hopewood Academy. And I think there was just enough time in the term where Mason was actually able to have a few transition days with his support worker at the nursery so that he could transition, and they went really well. But the downside is, yes, he's got a special place. I think it was like 10 miles away. And I know for everybody, 10 miles is either, oh, that's nothing, it's 10 minutes in the car, or it's, I don't drive, how the hell do we get there? Now, I drive, Mummy doesn't, but, we were concerned because obviously we had never, aside from dropping Mason at nursery, we'd never let him go with anyone else. He'd never really been in anybody else's car. But then, obviously, all of a sudden you're going, all right, that's the school he's going to. We'll have a taxi pick him up. Right. How's it going to be in the taxi? We don't know. And then you've got all that transport issue as well. But yeah, that basically is his journey to getting his actual placement.
How's it going in school now? How's he finding it? Have they had to make any changes to kind of accommodate the sight issues, or is it too early on for you to be considering that?
Actually, and I'll tell you what, this is again, it speaks to the kind of good fortune that we've got. When he was getting ill towards the back end of the academic year last year, there was a lot of concern from obviously both of us, but and school going, well, what is it? Once we had hinted that, well, his eyes were inflamed, whatever, and once we'd gone back to ophthalmology or whatever, even before we had any sort of diagnosis or anything, and just at the early stages of it being just apparent that he was struggling to use his eyes, And I actually remember, it was the summer holidays last year, and we just noticed it as parents a lot more. He's struggling. He doesn't seem to be opening his eyes. They're all swollen. We didn't know what's going on. So, like, Mammy was actually getting really anxious about sending him back to school because it was to the point where we were having to hold him hand in hand and guide him everywhere, which
Yeah.
is not normal for him. So we're
Yeah.
like, well, how's he going to cope at school? And they're not going to know and all this and all that. And obviously, when they go in a taxi, you don't get that 5 minutes with a teacher at the end of the day and at the start of the morning where you can go, just so you know, da 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 da. You know, you get a little diary which is very rapidly filled out with how many crackers he's had, and that was about it. But in all fairness, we literally phoned the school, I think, a couple of days. I think, when the staff had returned, but before the pupils did, and we says, look, we'll bring him in by car rather than taxi. And, I think we need a chat with someone because we're worried how he's going to cope at school and how are you going to cope because, he doesn't seem to be opening his eyes. He's really, he's struggling. So we actually ended up literally, he says, right, no worries, let the kids come in, let them come on the taxi if you want. And 9:30 or 10 o'clock, I think it was literally the head teacher, says, right, meet with me. We'll have a cup of tea, and you'll have me as long as you need, and we'll go through all your worries and what we can do to put that in. What can we do? So, we had that chat, and she's like, right, well, don't worry about, if he needs that extra support around breaks, lunches, if it's all the time, we'll find it. Don't worry at this point about, because I was already thinking, well, they need to amend his EHCP because if he does need a one-to-one, well, that's more funding that they need. So that means they need a. She's like, right, that's our problem. You just worry about him. We're going to look after him, whatever that takes. So, that put Mum's mind at ease. And so, yeah, I mean, how they wrangled it, I don't know. But basically, somebody was pretty much watching him all the time. I mean, it was already a high level of support because you were in a special school. So it was a bit more suitable. But there was, more particular if you're getting around the school, it's hand in hand and stuff like that. So they were able to put that in place. I suppose another thing in the good fortune was there just so happened to be a child in the same class that also was vision impaired. So he was either, I don't know if he'd always been vision impaired or if he himself had just become vision impaired over the last year, but all of his staff, like all of that particular class, had only just gone through all the visual impairment and all that training for him. So they were like, well, there's no reason we can't do the same stuff for Mason as well. They had a QTVI coming in for that child who they were able to go, any chance while you're in, because you're in the same class, parents are struggling, they're going back and forth to like opticians and whatever. Any chance you can have a look at Mason while you're there? All right. Yeah, okay. So then we had the QTVI kind of contacting us going, are you happy for us to work with Mason? It just kind of snowballed from there. Yeah, so, I mean, how fortunate is it that we had, a very good optometrist / optician / ophthalmologist who himself had a kid with additional needs. So he has developed his own way of working with kids with additional needs. Mason then was in a class with a child with a visual needs, so the staff knew what to do. He got put in contact with the QTVI before, you all right, my son? Like, before he'd even had a diagnosis. I say, like, he has been really, really lucky.
How did Ashton's EHCP process go and getting him in the right school?
Yeah, okay. Well, Ashton, so this kind of speaks to what you said at the start around parents with complex needs, especially when it's so apparent. You just assume oh, well, this is what happens, this is where they go. So even though I'd been through the whole process with Mason, I knew, as silly as it sounds, to be thinking about EHCPs at the age of 1, that's when you need to do it. It sounds
Yeah.
silly, I know, because in your head you go, he doesn't actually legally have to go to school till he's 4 or 5.
Yeah.
But once you've had that bit of experience with Mason, you go, well, actually, the special school, they take on a 2-year-old. So the school he goes to, they go from 2-year-old right through to 19. So
Yeah.
rather than trying to find a nursery, like a traditional nursery, let's just get the EHCP done early and he'll just get to go there. Great.
Yeah.
Although I had actually toyed with the idea of sending Ashton to Selby Cottage because they did get to meet him when Mason was there and the staff just loved him. I mean, he adored him. But I was like, well, we'll see what happens with the EHCP. And I think maybe it's because it wasn't a special school, it was just a nursery. I rather foolishly thought, oh, well, whenever I make my mind up, I can just phone the nursery and say, all right, I'll send Ashton along there. So by the time I'd actually done that, they were like, really sorry, but we're full. And again, now, because his needs were so much more complex than Mason, and I think because his needs were physical, as I suppose, a child with autism, but other than that is fit and well, you have to basically just base it on anecdotes on what we see him doing, because otherwise, if you just look at the child, you might not see anything. Whereas when you've got a child that has hydrocephalus, he's in a wheelchair, he cannot lift his head up. Well, I can just send you a picture of that and you already know. So I rather foolishly thought, oh, that's quite easy. And to be fair, the EHCP itself was a breeze. Yeah, no worries. I can see all the medical stuff. You can have your EHCP. No problem whatsoever. Special and suitable, mainstream, possibly with a lot of support if you really want to. But, special is certainly suited for Ashton. What they ended up doing was naming the special school that Mason goes to for Ashton. And I can understand that on paper. Well, that just makes sense. His brother goes there. They can share a taxi. That'll save a few quid.
Yeah.
And, they'll go together. But the difference is, not every special school is the same. In just the same way, I'm sure no 2 schools are the same, but I suppose mainstream, at least they're following a national curriculum. So what we actually found was Ashton's PMLD experience in that particular school was going to be the whole PMLD department is 2 classrooms. You've got one for, whether it's one up to Key Stage 1 and then one for Key Stage 2, or how they differentiate it, I'm not sure. But the entire PMLD department is you start in one class, you're there for a few years, and then you move next door. And that was it. Yes, they had some outdoor play, and again, I'm sure that if we hadn't have known anything else or been aware of anything else, we would have accepted it, and I'm sure he would have done all right. But in the intervening year, we had actually been doing conductive education with Ashton at a local charity. So Ashton had been doing conductive education at a charity. So we'd been had a bit of an insight into what conductive education is and what. I think it's a way of teaching, which basically, I think it just focuses a lot more on their disability and how can they help work around his disabilities to get him moving or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it's just a lot more intensive, even more so than special, in terms of like the support. And there just so happens to be a special school in county that offers conductive education. but of course it costs a few more quid. Now, so, I mean, conductive education places, they were few and far between. I think there was only maybe 3 or 4 in that school, but, I think the child would really, really, really benefit from.
Yeah.
So, obviously, we went back to the LA, and we go, right, well, what's the outcomes? And they went, oh, well, we've named Hopewood. And again, like I say, we weren't over the moon with it. We also had a yes back from Villarreal, but only if it was conductive ed. And then I think at the time it was a no from Trinity just because they didn't have the space or something at the time, or there was just no response yet. One or the other. So I ended up going to the caseworker. Just says, look, I appreciate that there is a place for Ashton in Mason School. I can see the logic behind it, but hand on heart, it's not where it's not where we want to send it. We've obviously done the visit at Trinity and Villarreal, and we personally think they are much better for him. I mean, both of them schools offered hydrotherapy, just like built into the timetable and things like that. Swimming. I mean, just the tour around the school at Trinity, when we'd been used to Hopewood, it blew us away. The facilities they had, it blew us away. And Villarreal, much the same. So obviously, I think once you have a visit to one of them places and you go, oh my God, you mean he could be getting hydrotherapy at school?
Yeah.
That's what I want. That's what I want for him. I want the best for him. So we ended up going, look, they've offered him a place at Villarreal, but it's conductive ed. Now, admittedly, I think we were a little bit torn between wanting the best education for it and worrying about transport to get him there. Because, yes, they would have taxied him if he had have gotten the place. But he wasn't quite as comfortable on car journeys on his own. And concert is actually quite a long way away from where we are. And it's about 45 minutes. And then, as parents, you've then got 2 different special. In this particular case, if he had have attended the conductive education one, they would have been at completely opposite ends of the county. And if you ever had to go between the 2 schools, you wouldn't be able to. They're so far apart. Actually, it was weird. We just got the EHCP through the post one day, like the finalised one, and it just had the school printed on it. I don't even think it was an email or a phone call. It just had it printed. And I went, oh, did he get a place? Oh, yeah, I forgot to tell you. Oh, yeah, he has. They're in Trinity. Oh, get it. Oh, great. So yeah, that's our journey to getting the boys where they are now. And again, once he started school, and he basically started at nursery age, he'd been going there, I think, since he was 3, and always on a taxi as well. He's just adapted to it. And class loving being there. He's got one of these infectious laughs when he's happy. I'm on a few parent support groups on Facebook, and anytime I see a parent just thinking about it, I'll go, look, get your EHCP in now. Don't wait, because a lot of the parents will be like, I'll think, do I need to be thinking of an EHCP when he turns 4? And I'm like, if you're thinking about it for when he turns 4, do it now. Because it's a long process, and you just need to do it.
So for this segment of the show, I'm going to introduce Layla. And she's going to be talking about her son Milo, who's 9 years old, and attends a mainstream setting. So just a little bit of a different dimension for the podcast, because we've heard lots about people from specialist settings, VI and complex needs. So Layla's battle for education looks a little bit different from what we've heard about. So I'm going to hand over to you, Layla, if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your lovely son Milo.
Hiya, I am Layla. I am mummy to Milo. He's actually 8, but he's nearly 9. as he will tell everyone. Milo has ocular cutaneous albinism, type 1A, we believe, but mainly by his characteristics. And he also has nystagmus. He does attend a mainstream primary school. He does have an EHCP, gets quite a high band of funding. He does have a one-to-one throughout the day to ensure that he's safe and can access the learning materials while he's at school.
So, Layla, he's quite happy in mainstream school, and you feel that that's where he will continue his education?
Yeah, he does. I mean, he has these weeks where he hates school. Like the end of term coming up was quite tricky for him because they do assessments, they have tests, and he doesn't really like that. And he hates to think that he's getting something wrong, so it can build a lot of anxiety in him at school. He can get a little bit frustrated because often the materials that are being printed out are not reproduced in the best way. They're quite pixelated. And often they're a photocopy of an A4 sheet and then it's enlarged onto an A3 sheet. So it's quite big, it's quite bulky, and particularly if it's multiple pages he's got to turn. He really, really doesn't like that. But he does have tech as well. He has a tech that's a tablet with a keyboard that can be used as a magnifier as well, which he really, really does like to use. And he uses it quite well. He can use it better than most of the adults at school, as I'm often told, that he does things to it. And they're like, oh, how did you do that? Because he's just very, very tech savvy. I'm sure he'll work in tech when he gets older.
So he's in school, the placement works, you've got the EHCP, but your main battle has been around access, and we spoke about it quite in depth ahead of sitting down and recording now, and you've just touched on it a little bit. So if you just want to, I imagine there'll be lots of parents who are listening who've gone through or are going through the exact same thing. So, you know, when he was little, it was all right, and you knew that things were going to change. You do have a background in SEND education yourself, don't you?
Yeah. So when he went to a preschool before starting school, where I actually applied for his EHCP myself. Prior to having Milo, I was a nursery manager, and it's kind of something I'd done quite a few times. And I didn't really want to relinquish control of that over to the preschool, not because I didn't think that they could do it, but I just felt that I could give it more time. So I actually did the EHCP myself. It was very in depth. I made sure I did my research. I made sure I had all reports that was backing up what I was saying, from Moorfield, from paediatricians, from dermatology, you know, things like his sun cream. Schools won't apply that. You know, you need something from a dermatologist to put in there. So that needed to all be in his EHCP. And I was successful. We got it fairly quickly. We got it secured very, very quickly, with a high funding band. Within that as well, I made sure that he said that he would be learning Braille, and then that he would be using assistive technology to support him to access the curriculum. I also discussed in there that he would need the VI curriculum as well, would need to be embedded within his day. That maths, English and science was really, really important, but actually that VI curriculum and those life skills were equally as important to him, and they needed to be part of his day at school alongside the other things that he was doing. Also in there was that he would be learning Braille, which has probably been the biggest battle that we've had going through school. Milo is severely sight impaired, and you know, I think many children with a vision impairment mask very well, because often they're born with their sight and they don't know any different. So how they access the world is how they access the world. I see it as our role as the adults, that we're teaching them that actually there are different ways that you can access this, and there's different ways that you can do that, but that doesn't always align with funding and what is accessible to them through the education system. So quite early on, we wanted him to have basically an immersive curriculum, really, and as you said, like I work, I'm a SEND co for a nursery, and one of the things that is always drummed into us is early intervention is really, really important. And particularly if you've got children that have a hearing impairment, or children that may be neurodiverse, and particularly if they're non-speaking, you have this whole communication approach that we throw everything at, and we're using pictures, we're using visuals, we're using signs, you're using objects of reference, you're using all these kind of things. But actually, when it comes to vision impairment, we're told we've got to pick. Well, you either pick large print font or you pick Braille. And it could be extremely frustrating, particularly in mainstream, and particularly at Milo School. They're a very inclusive school. They're a school for the hearing impaired. They have a lot of children with SEND needs. I mean, I think when Milo was in reception, he was one of 15 children with an EHCP. So they're very, very inclusive. But he was the only blind child, and they're learning through Milo. And I think, he's leading. There is another child with a vision impairment, the same condition actually, a couple of years younger than him. And I was like, she's got it made, because, they've learned through Milo. They have all these resources done, but the school are, I feel that sometimes, because they don't know and they're being led by the local authority with what works and what doesn't work, rather than it being individualized for Milo, that it's like, oh, well, this is what children with VI need. And it's like, Milo doesn't need that. Milo needs this. And I think that sometimes is what is the biggest impact on his access to the curriculum, that, the QTVI comes in once a term. Do you know my child? No. Does his LSA that sits with him all day know my child? Absolutely. And, that's one of the things I always say to them. We had one QTVI that said he can't go in the sensory room because the lights hurt his eyes. And I was like, no. I was like, has anyone asked Milo? And they were like, well, no. And I said, well, it's his eyes. How do you know it hurts his eyes? And I said to him, he used to like going in, he'd take his shoes and socks off, glasses off, and he'd lay under the fibre optic lights. And she said, no, you can't do that. It hurt his eyes. And I remember when the LSA said to me, and I said, what do you think? And she said, I think he needs that twice a day, once in the morning, once in the afternoon. I said, then go with what you think, because you know him better. And she was like, oh, no, I can't. And I ended up writing an email saying, absolutely not. This LSA knows him better. The lights are fine. He will tell you if those lights hurt his eyes. That should definitely be part of his day at school. But it's constantly like that. They told many reasons I got given why he couldn't learn Braille. One being he didn't have the finger dexterity. Then they told me that they didn't teach it in the local authority. And I kind of said, you're forgetting that many, many years ago, you set up a group for parents of children with vision impairment. And I'm part of that group still. We all still meet up. And a number of those children are learning Braille with this local authority. So then they decided that, maybe we'll go. They said he had too much functional vision for Braille, that he'd just read the dots on the paper. I assured them that he couldn't see white dots on a white piece of paper. He most definitely would not be able to see them. And actually, when he is doing Braille now, when he types, the funniest thing is he stands up and types, and he puts his head down so that he's looking at the bar moving along, which always makes me laugh, because I just think, they'd have a field day with this if they could see you, because he's not actually looking at the Braille, he's looking at the bar moving to make sure he's got a space in the right place, because then he'll feel along and go, yep, there's a space, and then carry on, or he'll go back. Yeah, so it's been a battle to get him anywhere, and that started when he was in year 1. He's now just finished year 3, and they've only just agreed to do Braille at school. When we had the annual review last year, they said they would teach the teachers Braille, and then they could support Milo, but they wouldn't directly teach Milo Braille. So I ended up sourcing it myself with a local charity, and took him out of school for an hour a week to have his Braille lessons.
How did the school respond when you requested that you wanted to do that? Were they on board, or was there some pushback?
The school was on board. They really was. And they said, they were happy to facilitate it. The charity also offered to teach one of the LSA Braille. Unfortunately, they said, we couldn't free them up. And I just thought that was a bit pointless, because I thought, well, they'd be with Milo anyway. And it's literally, it was a 5-minute walk from the school. It was just over the road. So it wasn't far. But, now they'll be teaching, the local authority have agreed to teach one adult to support him next term, but it's one adult. It's better than no adults. But yeah, we're focusing on grade 1 to start with, to see how he gets on. But, they kept saying to me, but he can use a phone. And because I said, like, getting into a lift, he's like this, he's bending down and his face is this close to it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's all well and good being 8, but when he's 18 and he's like, if he keeps growing the way he is, he'll be over 6 foot by the time he's 18. He's got to bend down to see where the buttons are in the lift. Come on, like, if he can read Braille, he can do that. Finding a toilet, Going on holiday, we'd been on holiday last week, and we were in Lanzarote, brow everywhere. And he was reading it.
Yeah.
He was telling me what it said, and it's in, now I know more about it, it's everywhere. And they say, yeah, but it's not in many places. It is. It's in lots of places. It's lots. Like he was, we had it on the room numbers. They had it in the lift. They had it on the toilets. He was absolutely made up. He was like, find me the brow, mummy. So literally, one of our missions was to go and find where brow was so that he could read it.
Do you think that the pushback was because the financial side of it? Because obviously, if you start him off with it now, they're going to have to carry on with it, which means that obviously,
I was shocked at how little QTVIs are trained in it, and I think that's a big impact. And when I went to Moorfields and we spoke to the family liaison team there, one of the lady that we're under, she's actually a QTVI in London, and she said I'd have had it when she did his assessment on brow to see if he was ready for it. She said I'd have had him doing this years ago. And I just think, different local authorities do things differently. And I do think it's monetary. And I know from obviously other families within the same local authority as us, one of our lovely friends, Elsie, I know her mum is told pick brow or large print, and Elsie has less vision than Milo. And it shouldn't be a choice. There shouldn't have to be a choice in how they access the curriculum. Teach them both. What is the high? Because the world, they're telling me that brow isn't everywhere and large print is better, and then they're telling her that brow's everywhere. She'll read brow everywhere. She won't see letters. Teach her brow, and and it's just that conflicting information. And I don't know if they don't think people talk or there's not conversations happening. But we're having these conversations, and we're like, that's crazy that they're telling us the same thing but the other way round. And I just think that there should be this total approach to accessibility and how they access it. They should be taught both. There's no reason, if they've got a bit of vision, unless they're obviously totally blind, and that, that's a very small percentage of people. It's about around 3%, isn't it?
Yeah.
That, they should have access to both, because the world is both. And like I said, and they've said to me before, yeah, but he'll have a phone and he can zoom in. And I said, what if his battery dies? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, my battery dies on a regular. What if he's on a train and his battery dies and he doesn't know where to get off and no one's there to help him? Like, that doesn't help him in that situation. Where actually, if he can read brow and large print, he's more than likely going to be able to find help or get help from somewhere, or have an indication of where he is and where he needs to go.
Yeah, it's just like, imagine if you was quite good at playing guitar and there was a couple of, barriers to you playing guitar. So you thought, you know what, I'm going to learn how to play piano. And it's like being told, oh, well, what's the point? You can already play the guitar. Why should there be a barrier to having as many skills? Surely being able to use tech, large print and braille is going to put you at a benefit than only being able to access one version of something. And, obviously, we know it's because of money, and you've done very well pushing back and proving your point. For any parents listening, have you got any hints or tips about, obviously you're from a Senko background and you work in early years education, so it's going to be, it's going to put you in a really good position to understand how to, but for any parents who aren't in that situation, what would you recommend is the best way to contest when they say no? How do you make them change their minds?
I always say, yes. And this is what I often say to my parents at work as well, and anyone I'm getting an EHCP with, I always say preparation is key. Fail to prepare to fail. Your evidence is key. If you're thinking your child is 3 and you know that they're severely sight impaired, and you're thinking, do you know what, we're going to be going down the brow route, or you want to explore that, you need to be doing your research, looking at pre-brow, making sure you're getting those activities in, mentioning it every time you go to the hospital. We're very lucky that our Moorfields team, Milo moved to Moorfields just before he was 2, and we had a very poor experience at our local hospital, and they have been next level. When he started school, he got put in low vision clinic, so we see the same person, lovely Priya, I love her so much, but we see her every year, and Milo loves going to see her, and she has really helped us understand what is going to help Milo. And she backs everything up that we discuss with a report. And that then gets sent to the local authority. And I did have a complaint that I put in once to the local authority, where they reduced Milo's font size against Moorfield's advice. And actually, in my complaint, I said, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that you're a qualified teacher that specialises in supporting children that are blind. You're not an ophthalmologist. You're not an optometrist. You're not a specialist in eyes and vision. You've not seen the back of his eye. You've not looked at the images. You've not tested his vision in that way. You sit with him in a dimly lit corridor on a string that measures out 6 metres and hold up cards. That is not the same as a clinical assessment. And actually what the clinicians are saying, the experts, the leading eye hospital in this country, is what my son gets, not what a qualified teacher decides is what he needs in school. And one of them even said to us, well, he can bring the paper closer to his face. And I was like, he can absolutely not. He can have it accessible to him.
No, I think I think there's a theme running through the whole of this podcast. I know you've not listened to the other segments where when you're told no, find a different way to fight back. And a lot of the time it is getting those professionals, like you say, Priya from the low vision clinic, all those reports, they don't listen to parents. They listen to those reports. And I think there must be some way that they're legally bound that they have to and I think what the reports say and not what the parents say.
One of the mistakes that I made, particularly with Milo's EHCP, was, so although in it, one of the provisions is brow, it doesn't specify when and how. And that's where I messed up. So he's EHCP is very thorough. You read it and you're like, oh, the provision is great. But actually within that, it just names the provision. It doesn't say when it's going to be delivered, how it's going to be delivered and how often. So I'll say that to parents as well. When you're getting your draft EHCPs or before you're getting to that point, make sure that your reports that are coming in with your supporting evidence to say that this should be done X amount of times a week or a month or whatever. Because even, when we've had Milo started school so from reception, and his QTVI that we had up until he was year 2 had actually been with us since he was 1. So she used to come around our house. She went to preschool and we actually saw her every month. We saw her every 4 weeks. And then when he started preschool, she'd come 1 month at home, 1 month at preschool. And then he started school and she went to every 8 weeks. So I was like, that's okay. I was a bit upset. I weren't going to see her anymore. And then that went to 12 weeks. And then we got a new QTVI. So the one he had was the one that could teach brow. Never taught brow. He told me he didn't have the finger dexterity. He had too much functional vision. Yada, yada, yada. Went on. I pushed back every annual review. Then we changed QTVIs, which was one that I worked with with a child in my setting. So I knew her quite well, but I knew she couldn't teach brow because I worked with her in a professional capacity. So I knew that had kind of been put off the table. She basically said, we're not going to teach it. It's not going to be taught. So I said, it will. It's just about how and where it gets done. Even if I have to pay for it or have someone come and do it, that's what we'll do. And then a year later she went, and then we got our third QTVI, who was actually the senior lead QTVI. I was like, I've got you because I'm a moany mum. But I was like, bring it on. She also told me that he can bring work closer to his face. He can have smaller font size. She did a whole training session on reprographics at the school, which I then put in a complaint email. And I said, we had an annual review 2 weeks ago where we discussed that would not be happening because, photocopied work is no longer working for Milo. It doesn't work. It's not accessible. Can't see it. It's on the wrong colour paper. And then in the next annual review, I actually went in armed with bits of paper, yellow and white, with the correct font size on it and examples of work that I've got Milo to bring work home. And I said, look, this is why you can't see it. The class teacher, he was brilliant. And he was like, I'm going to make sure that this is different. In that annual review, she said that they would support the staff learning brow to support Milo, but wouldn't be teaching it to Milo. To which I said, it will be. And even if I have to take him out of school to do it, I'll be taking him out of school to do it. Which was a bit of like, oh, well, we don't advise that. And I was like, I don't care. I then sourced it. We went to the local charity basis, and within 3 weeks he was in his first brow lesson, doing really well. Initially he only lasted about 20 minutes. He found it really taxing, but he loves it now, and he loves the brailler, and he blows my mind how he remembers the codes, and he remembers the numbers and how to do it, and reading it. He just started to read it. The unfortunate thing is, because he's now finished his lessons and they're not starting Braille until September in school, because I then sent them, very proudly sent his certificate. Oh, Milo's done grade 1 Braille. And they were like, oh my gosh. I was like, so can we now look at this being in school, because it's just not working for him. It just isn't. And she agreed. She said, yeah, absolutely, we'll do it. She come in, she's bought a Brailler in, she's bought some stuff. And I just said to the same class, I said, just let him explore it in the classroom, let him show other people it. Because after his lessons, quite a few times, he took his Brailler into school with his pad, and he really, really enjoyed it and enjoyed doing it in lessons. Milo's very, he knows his own mind, and he was like, I'll use it for reading and writing, but I don't want to use it for maths, because I use my head for maths. Because he does everything. He's very, he does it all up here. Often when they'll say to him, can you show me your workings out? He's like, I just know it. Like, I don't know how I got to the answer. It's correct, but he does it in his head. But she actually discussed, there's a maths Braille is probably going to be something he'll really, really like, because he loves numbers. So I was like, brilliant, like this really, really positive. But they wouldn't start it until September, which is fine. But then it's going to have been 2 months before he's done any, because we had to give the brailler back to the charity. So it'll almost be kind of starting again. But we're still reading it. We're finding it in our environment. He's just not typing it. And my hope is, because he does have the keyboard, but he actually hates touch typing. He detests it. He doesn't like it. But I think it's because he's slow. But with the brailler keyboard, he's really fast.
Yeah.
And so I said that you can get a Braille keyboard that goes into your tech, and he was like, what? I said, you've got just 6 buttons. I was like, yeah. And he was like, yeah, well, I'll have that. So I'm hoping that the two will be merged and it will go with his tech, because he uses assistive technology all the time. I mean, he's a whiz on an iPad, any Apple product. Like, I'm like that. How did you do that? And sometimes I come in and I've got audio description on my telly, and I'm like, how did you do that? He goes, oh, it's easy, Mum. And I'm like, what? Show me again. He's like, I'm just talking to this bit, takes me here, and then I click this button, and I'm like, right, okay. But I guess for him, that's how he accesses the world. So it comes very natural to him. You only have to show him it once, and he kind of gets it. But I think that's because it's accessible, if that makes sense.
It's accessible and it's motivating as well. We talk about like children learning, and you have to find what motivates them. And if he's, developed an affinity to it, and you've proved that in numerous ways, despite the professionals coming back and saying it's pointless, like you say, he's doing it with reading and writing, and if he really loves numbers and it gets incorporated into the tech, it's going to help him
He'll
get to the same
with it,
the children. Then, there's no need to be on this back foot that a lot of our children are on all the time, whether or not it's fighting against tech with the battery dying.
Yeah, that's it. And this is what I said to the school. I said, look, you know what? He stands out enough as it is, and he's become very aware. He's nearly 9. He's very aware he's different. We've got to that point now. He's got a cane. Often doesn't want to use a cane at school anymore. Although he typically, so he's going into a new classroom, and he's upstairs this year. I mean, he is beyond happy that he's in an upstairs classroom. He thinks he's the bee's knees. And he will use his cane probably for the first month and a half when he's at school. But once he knows where he's going, he won't use it at school at all. It's always in his bag. But even that cane training, I did myself. I did at home. Contacted guide dogs, watched some videos, got some information. And then I sent videos to our local habilitation at the council and said, right, tell me what to do. This is him using it. What have I got to do? And they were like, sorry. They wouldn't even teach him cane training. He was 2, and he used to use like strollers, and he used to use like a broom, and he'd like map. So he was doing it from a very young age. And I did it all. He's only this year started having habilitation at school. But he's actually, and they're like, where'd you get your canes from? And I'm like, the RNIB, I buy them myself. And they're like, oh no, you shouldn't. I was like, well, we'd still be waiting for one if I was waiting for you guys to do it, because he should have had this at 2, 3. I think the last time they saw him, he was in year 1. When he moved from reception to year 1, when they went and looked at the year 2 classroom, they wasn't even there. And I was like, it's pointless. I said, they don't know him. Like, and they'd telling them where to sit him, and he was like, I don't want to sit down. Like, talk to him, he will tell you. Like, you know, and we had a bit of an issue with his tech. He kept not wanting to use it, and he was like, I can't see the screen. And the teachers were looking at it and they were like, the screen's fine. They sent pictures to the QTVI, and in the end, she was like, I'm going to come in and look at it. Because he just thought he'd be like that. He's like, no, I'm not doing it. I can't see it. And then it turned out that where he was sat, there was a strip light above him, and it was going straight down the middle of the screen. So with how his photophobia and all that is, it just blurred it. So it just made the whole screen look white. And she was like, he won't be able to see it. It would just literally, and they've now moved his seat, and it's much better. But he couldn't see that. And the teachers weren't kind of looking for that in it. I mean, they'll probably be very aware of it now, but that went on for a good 6-7 weeks before it was picked up that it was literally just a light above him.
It's frustrating though, because he's missed out on 6 or 7 weeks of learning. And then obviously going to be teachers getting frustrated thinking he's being avoidant or resistant to learning. And
and Milo is diagnosed as having ADHD as well, so they're giving him more movement breaks, and they're like, he just needs a break, he needs a rest, and I'm like, no, you don't, because now what he wants is more movement breaks. He's like, well, I was having 4, I want more than 2 now. I was having 4 a couple of weeks ago, because in his head he's like, well, I have 4 now, and they're like, oh no, that was because of your screen, because we couldn't work out what was wrong with it. And he's now like, no, I have 4 movement breaks, not 2.
No, well, thank you for sharing all that around habilitation, accessibility, tech, Braille. There's lots of things for people to go away and think about. But I'd like to know a little bit about Milo's future. You've got some plans, haven't you, with secondary school and where you'd like him to be? And what do you anticipate is going to be the pushback around that?
I think one of the big things for me is, do I send him where his friends go, or do I send him to a school that can support his VI in an effective way? Which is really hard, because with my oldest, when I was looking at secondary schools, I was like, she's going to learn anywhere. So just need to pick the school that meets her. She used to struggle a lot with anxiety. So a school that meets those anxiety needs. And then for me, I'm like, you know, I've spoken a lot to Milo about it, and he just says, I just want to go where my friends go, and he'll name a couple friends. I've spoken to these friends' parents, and they're all picking different schools. Their catchment schools are all different. So Milo will be very much part of the decision-making process, and I will take him. We're going to actually start looking from September, because we have to apparently pick and name it in his annual review when he's in year 5. Although, as I said earlier, that might change, because he'll be in that first year of the SEND reform and the EHCP reviews that in 2029 is when he starts secondary school. So we don't actually know whether it will look the way it's looking, which again is a little bit scary, that what we thought was going to happen might not happen. So we're quite lucky that about 15 minutes away, there is a secondary school with a VI hub in the school. And they follow the VI curriculum in there as well. So they've got like a kitchen in there. It looks really cool online. So we're definitely going to go and look at that one. And then again, looking at the local ones, because, you know, one of his things is I can't wait to go to school on my own, and I don't have to be taken by a parent, which again for me is like, we might have to get on a bus to go to school. I'll literally be stalking him wearing, you know, a hat and coat. He can't see me. But you know, like, how is he gonna get there? And there is a school at the moment that is kind of up the road. Well, it is a bus ride from us, but we would drop him off. It's quite close to where his primary school is, and a number of his friends will be going there. And I know they've got a child there with albinism at the moment. So I was like, brilliant, he'll follow suit. And then I've heard that actually they're not supporting their needs very well, that the support team is great that's in the school, but the head teacher isn't very inclusive, doesn't like to adapt the curriculum, and this child basically sits in the hub and isn't in the classroom, which is what I don't want for him. I want him to be able to be in the classroom. I mean, the idea of him moving around classes absolutely kills me, but you know, that's part and parcel of secondary school, isn't it? And I don't want him to miss out on those opportunities, because I'm scared that he won't be able to do it, because I know he'll adapt very well, and he'll know very quickly where his classrooms are. You know, I just think he must have like a little map in his brain that he maps things out, and he knows where he's going and how he gets there. But yeah, so that's going to be probably a bigger challenge than picking a primary school.
Yeah. No, 100%. A lot of parents say the same thing as well. So there will be people who've gone through it or are thinking
Yeah.
about going through it. And
Well, I think about him carrying his tech because they said, "Oh yeah, his tech will go with him to secondary school." It comes in a backpack. It's so big. I'm like, it comes in a backpack, and then he's gonna have his school bag, PE kit. Like I'm like, Kane. I'm sitting there like, oh goodness, like, how is he gonna do that?
Well, hopefully they have some proper hab in place for when that time comes,
Mm.
because that is a common concern among a lot of parents, and a lot of young people with visual impairment I've spoken to quite happy in primary school. Secondary school
Yeah.
becomes a different kettle of fish, especially if you stay. I know you've got the VI resource base, but especially if you're staying within mainstream, there are common worries, and there will be people listening who will have those same worries. And I just want to say a huge thank you for joining me and sharing everything that's going on. And I think, another great example of someone not stopping and getting things in place for your child. And
I think it's just important to always fight, and don't be scared. Like, I'm going to offend someone, I'm going to upset someone because I'm fighting for what my child needs. At the end of the day, his needs, are a priority. And if I upset the local authority or a teacher, so be it for that process. I speak to a lot of parents that are like, "Oh, I don't want to come across rude." I'm like, "Why? They're rude. They're not meeting your child's need. Come on, come across rude."
Thank you, Layla, and it was lovely
Thanks,
hearing
Charlotte.
more about Milo. And good evening. Thank you very much.